Jason, story part. The Luminos groaned like an ancient beast roused from a 1,000-year nap, though these days, it didn't carry the same intimidating authority. It was more like a grandparent trying to figure out a holographic intercom. Captain Alaris stood with her arms folded, staring at the cockpit console that blinked at her with the same confusion she felt. Nice job, Luminos, she muttered. You've forgotten how to breathe, it seems. N the ship's AI, usually as sharp as a dagger, replied with an almost apologetic tone. I am aware of my current deficiencies, Captain Alaris. Diagnostics indicate a significant data loss in memory sectors 5 through 33. In other words, amnesia, Alaris sighed. Vex, you hearing this? N Vex, the ship's resident scientist and part-time existential crisis manager, popped out from behind a mass of blinking machinery. He was always tinkering with something, mostly because he found it relaxing, or so he claimed. I heard. Loss of memory on a sentient starship. That's about as reassuring as a blind surgeon with a chainsaw, N, and about as safe, Alaris added. Can you fix it, N Vex scratched his stubble with a spanner. Well, I could try a hard reset, but that usually turns out like hitting your TV when it's not working, satisfying but ultimately useless. N, Great, Alaris said, rolling her eyes. Any idea what caused this? N, Not yet, but I've got my suspicions, Vex replied. Let's just say there are some unauthorized fingerprints on the digital cookie jar. N, Alaris groaned. Please don't tell me it's another one of those galactic cloning experiments gone wrong. N, Vex shrugged. It's like they never learn, right? Oh, let's just clone something again. What's the worst that could happen? N, Besides killing everyone on board with a defective clone army, Alaris quipped. N, Exactly, Vex said, nodding sagely. N, the ship shuddered again, and this time Alaris swore it was out of frustration. All right, let's stop the ship from having a nervous breakdown. Where do we start? N, Vex grinned, the kind of grin that usually made Alaris miss her safety protocols. I suggest we start by going down to the archives. Time to dust off some old files and see if we can find out what happened to your brain, Luminos. N, I would appreciate that, the ship replied with a kind of mechanical sheepishness. N, they maneuvered through the narrow corridors, every other bulkhead a reminder that space was a luxury the Luminos didn't provide. You'd think a ship this size would have room for a little more legroom, Vex muttered. N, Are you complaining about your quarters again, Alaris asked. N, Not at all, Vex replied sarcastically. I love sleeping with my knees in my throat. Great for the spine. N, and they reached the archives, a dusty corner of the ship that smelt vaguely of old paper and electronic failure. Here we are, Alaris said, gesturing grandly. The heart of forgotten troubles. N, Vex dug into the mess, pulling out data drives and tossing them with the care of a juggler on a caffeine high. Now, if I was a nefarious hacker, where would I hide my secrets? N, Probably somewhere digital, Alaris said, watching the chaos unfold. But I appreciate your hands-on approach. N, he gave her a mock bow. Digital fingerprints are harder to wipe clean, you know. They leave trails. //n/n/n/, and those trails lead to what exactly Alaris asked, leaning against a console. /n/n Vex held up a drive triumphantly. To this. The motherlode of suspicious activity. /n/n Alaris took the drive, eyeing it like it was a bomb about to go off. And how do we know it's not just old data? /n/n/n/. We don't, Vex admitted. But it's our best shot at figuring out what scrambled Luminos's brains. /n/n. The ship's voice came over the comms. I must insist on the importance of restoring my full functionality. Presently, I am operating at 47.3% efficiency. /n/n/. We hear you, Luminos. Alaris assured the ship. Vex is working as fast as he can. And that's saying something. /n/n. Vex inserted the drive into a nearby terminal, the screen lighting up with a flurry of codes that looked like the disastrous offspring of a binary and an overly ambitious spreadsheet. Now we're cooking, Vex murmured, eyes darting across the screen. /n/n. The captain leaned over his shoulder. Find anything interesting, /n/n. That depends, Vex said. You consider illegal experimentation interesting, /n/n. Only in the way impending doom is interesting, Alaris replied. What kind of experiments are we talking? /n/n. Vex whistled low as he scrolled through the data. Cloning, but not just any cloning. This is the kind of stuff that'd make a mad scientist blush. /n/n. Alaris frowned. We're talking about human cloning, aren't we? /n/n. Bingo, Vex said, tapping the screen. And not just human. There's some alien DNA mixed in here too. /n/n. Terrific, Alaris said. As if regular humans weren't enough trouble. Now we've got hybrids running around potentially. /n/n. They were supposed to be more compliant, Vex said, half reading from the screen, half lost in thought. Guess that didn't pan out. /n/n. Clearly, Alaris said dryly. So, we've got an unauthorized cloning project on board, some missing memories, and an AI that's starting to sound like it's in therapy. /n/n. Sums it up nicely, Vex agreed, pulling a face. And here I thought space exploration was supposed to be boring. /n/n. If only, Alaris said with a rueful smile. /n/n. The ship shuddered again, prompting a new wave of grumbles from the bulkheads. Captain, the ongoing system anomalies are becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Luminos intoned. /n/n. Noted, Luminos. Alaris said, rubbing her temples. Vex, how soon can you get us back online at full capacity? /n/n. Depends on how fast I can untangle this mess, Vex said, gesturing to the lines of code. But first, we should probably locate the source of these experiments, /n/n. Agreed, Alaris said, straightening up. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find out who thought playing God was a good way to spend an afternoon. /n/n. As they left the archives, Alaris couldn't shake the feeling that the walls had grown eyes, and that those eyes were watching, waiting. It was the sort of feeling that made you wish you were anywhere but in the middle of an unidentified conspiracy. Next stop, the lower decks, Alaris declared. Let's see if our mystery scientists left us any breadcrumbs. /n/n. And hope they didn't leave any booby traps backslash Vex added. Backslash, I hate surprises. Backslash backslash n backslash n backslash, here's hoping backslash, Alaris muttered, leading the way. But deep down, she knew their luck had probably run out the moment they decided to fly through this God-forsaken part of the galaxy. Still, fortune favors the bold, or so she hoped. Either that or it simply chews them up and spits them out like it does everyone else. Backslash n, as they descended into the bowels of the ship, Vex couldn't help but mutter, backslash, you know, I've always wanted to get lost in the labyrinthine corridors of a derelict spaceship. Backslash n, funny, backslash, Alaris replied. Backslash, I'd always hoped I'd spend my days sipping cheap whiskey in a bar, telling tales of our survival with more hyperbole than fact. Backslash n, Vex chuckled. Backslash, well, if we survive this, you'll have quite the story to tell. Backslash n, if backslash, Alaris repeated, the word hanging heavy between them like an uninvited guest at a party. Backslash n, the lower decks were dark and claustrophobic, a perfect setting for a horror flick, or in their case, a potential mutiny. Every shadow seemed to twitch in the dim light as though aware of their presence. Backslash, remind me again, backslash Vex whispered, backslash, why are we doing this, backslash n, because we're idiots, backslash, Alaris replied. Backslash brave idiots, backslash n, I'll drink to that, backslash Vex said, casting a wary glance into the gloom ahead. Backslash n, they moved cautiously, the dim lights flickering as if undecided on whether to stay on or finally give up the ghost. Backslash, sensors are going haywire, backslash Vex noted, tapping a device strapped to his wrist. Backslash, not a good sign. Backslash n, nothing about this is backslash, Alaris said. Backslash, let's just find whatever experiment they were working on and get out. Backslash n, they rounded a corner to find a door marked with a large, ominous X. Backslash subtle, backslash, Vex commented. Backslash nothing screams secret lab quite like graffiti. Backslash n, let's hope it's not a treasure map. Backslash, Alaris said, moving forward. She pressed the control panel and the door slid open with a reluctant hiss. Backslash n, inside, the lab was a nightmare of biology and machinery. Tanks lined the walls, their contents obscured by murky liquid, while screens displayed the kind of genetic mumbo-jumbo that made Vex's head ache just to look at. Backslash, looks like we found the jackpot, backslash Vex said, stepping inside. Backslash n, or the end of the line, backslash, Alaris replied. Backslash, let's see what they were cooking up in here. Backslash n, as they approached one of the tanks, Alaris caught sight of a shape within, humanoid but not quite human. Backslash, I've got a bad feeling about this, backslash, she muttered. Backslash n, join the club, backslash, Vex replied, tapping on the console. Backslash, the data here confirms it. Hybrid experiments, genetic manipulation. You name it, they tried it. Backslash n, and probably failed, backslash, Alaris added, eyes narrowing. Backslash, we need to shut this down before it gets any worse. Backslash n, agreed, backslash, Vex said, fingers flying over the keyboard. Backslash, but I doubt our mystery scientists will be happy about that. Backslash n, let them try and stop us, backslash, Alaris said, her voice hard. Backslash, they've already done enough damage. Backslash n, Vex grinned. Backslash spoken like a true captain. Backslash n, their efforts were cut short by a sudden, ominous vibration. Backslash, what now, backslash, Alaris exclaimed, looking around. Backslash n, I think, backslash, Vex said slowly, backslash, we just woke the neighbors. Backslash /N/N, the tanks began to bubble ominously, and the room filled with the sound of alarms. /Time to go Vex suggested, already backing towards the door. /N/N time to go. Alaris agreed, turning on her heel. Let's move before whatever's in those tanks decides to introduce itself. /N/N they sprinted back towards the main corridors, the sound of hissing and gurgling following them like the world's worst backing track. Behind them, something thudded against one of the tank walls, followed by a series of cracks that sounded disturbingly like breaking glass. /N/N/. We're definitely not alone anymore. Vex panted, glancing back. /N/N/. Keep running, and let's hope Luminos can handle a bit of extra weight. Alaris replied. /N/N. They reached the lift just as a loud crash echoed through the hall, followed by an unhole. Let's hope our luck holds out a little longer. /N/N. As the lift doors closed, Alaris couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse. But if there was one thing she could count on, it was her crew and their uncanny ability to survive the odds. After all, they were human. And if humans were good at one thing, it was turning a bad situation into a slightly less terrible one. Title: Humanity's Unexpected Challenge. HF. The lift ground to a halt, doors creaking open with the enthusiasm of a teenager asked to take out the trash. Alaris and Vex stepped out into a corridor that looked like it hadn't seen a cleaner since before the concept of cleanliness was invented. Luminos, what's our status on those anomalies? Alaris asked, her voice bouncing off the grimy walls. The ship's voice came over the intercom, sounding slightly more frazzled than before. Still operating at reduced capacity, Captain. And I should inform you there's a 73% probability that whatever is pursuing you is highly interested in making your acquaintance. Terrific, Alaris muttered. Vex, any ideas? Run faster, Vex replied, not missing a beat. Preferably in the opposite direction of whatever's making that god-awful noise. As if on cue, the distant screeching reverberated through the ship, a sound that conjured images of rusty nails being dragged across a chalkboard designed by a sadist. Good plan, Alaris said. Let's move. They took off again down the corridor, boots clanging against the metal floor. Around them, the ship's lights flickered like an old movie projector on its last legs. The air smelled of ozone and something else, probably their dwindling chances of survival. So, Vex panted, what's the plan if we run into these? Science projects. Improvise, Alaris said. And hope they're as scared of us as we are of them. Somehow, I doubt it, Vex replied, dodging a low-hanging cable that seemed hell-bent on garroting him. They reached a junction and Alaris skidded to a halt, glancing at the map on her wrist device. We need to get to engineering. If we can access the mainframe, maybe we can shut down whatever's left of the labs. Right, Vex said, catching his breath. Because messing with the ship's mainframe has worked out so well for us so far. Got a better idea? Alaris challenged. Vex shrugged. Not dying's pretty high on my list. Then let's make it happen, Alaris said, taking off down the right-hand corridor. As they ran, Luminos chimed in again, its voice eerily calm given the circumstances. Captain, I have detected life signs converging on your location. It would be advisable to expedite your journey. Thanks for the tip, Alaris replied sarcastically. We'll be sure to leave a mint on their pillow. Your humor in the face of impending peril is noted, Luminos said, its voice tinged with what almost sounded like amusement. They reached the door to engineering, which, unsurprisingly, was locked down tighter than a miser's wallet. Alaris slammed her fist against the control panel in frustration. Can't you just hack it? She snapped at Vex. Sure, he replied. And while I'm at it, I'll solve world hunger, cure the common cold, and figure out why the hell anyone thought this was a good idea. Just get it open, she said, urgency sharpening her tone. Vex went to work, fingers flying over the console. You know, he said, I always figured my death would be something mundane, like choking on a sandwich. We'll make sure your tombstone reflects that, Ilaris replied, glancing nervously back the way they'd come. With a beep and a hiss, the door finally slid open. Ta-da, Vex said, bowing with a flourish. Welcome to engineering. Mind the bloodstains. They stepped inside, the room a chaotic jumble of consoles, cables, and the faint, coppery smell of old violence. Ilaris approached the main terminal, her mind racing. Okay, Luminos, she said. How do we shut down the labs? You will need to access the central control matrix and input a manual override, Luminos instructed. I should warn you there's a high probability this will trigger a failsafe response from the systems. Failsafe? Vex asked. As in self-destruct, possibly, Luminos confirmed nonchalantly. Wonderful, Ilaris muttered. Well, here goes nothing. As she worked on the console, Vex kept watch near the door, his blaster at the ready. How's it going? He called over his shoulder. Peachy, Ilaris said through gritted teeth. Just trying not to blow us all to hell in the process. Good luck with that, Vex said, glancing nervously down the corridor. Ilaris's fingers flew over the controls, the screen lighting up with a cascade of warnings and red text. Almost got it. Just a few more. A loud crash echoed down the hallway, followed by that bone-chilling screech. Ilaris, Vex said, his voice tight, I think we've overstayed our welcome. Working on it, she replied, sweat beading on her brow. The console beeped and the screen flashed green. Got it, Ilaris exclaimed. Nice work, Vex said, grinning. Now let's get out of here before he could finish, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Great, Vex said. Just great. Now what? Luminos chimed in, sounding almost apologetic. It appears the failsafe has engaged isolation protocols. You will need to disable the local locks manually. Of course we do, Ilaris said, rolling her eyes. Because nothing can ever be simple. Vex moved to another console, trying to override the lockdown. You know, he said, this is starting to feel like one of those old horror flicks where the idiots split up and get picked off one by one. Except we're not splitting up, Ilaris pointed out, working on her own console. And we're not idiots. Debatable, Vex replied with a grin. Another crash from outside made Ilaris hurry her efforts. Come on, come on. There, the door hissed open just as something large and unpleasant rounded the corner. Run, Ilaris shouted, not needing to be told twice herself. They bolted down the corridor, the creature in pursuit. Ilaris risked a glance back and immediately regretted it. The thing was a mess of limbs and teeth, like someone had taken a biology textbook and shaken it until all the wrong parts stuck together. Any chance we can reason with it? Vex asked, firing back over his shoulder. Not unless you speak abomination, Ilaris replied, ducking under a low beam. They skidded around a corner, dodging into a side passage. The creature followed, its claws scraping against the walls with a sound that set their teeth on edge. Luminos, Ilaris shouted, any chance of some help here? I am afraid my current capabilities are insufficient to provide direct assistance, Luminos replied. However, I can suggest a route that may lead to temporary safety. That'll have to do, Ilaris said, following the ship's directions with Vex close behind. They ducked through a series of passages, the creature's snarls echoing ominously behind them. Finally, they slid into a storage bay, sealing the door just as the creature slammed into it with a force that rattled the walls. That won't hold it for long, Vex said, catching his breath. Ilaris nodded, already scanning the room for options. There, she pointed to a set of maintenance hatches. Those should lead us back to the upper decks. They made their way to the hatches, the pounding on the door growing more insistent. Ilaris wrenched one open, motioning for Vex to go first. He climbed in and she followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them. The space was cramped, barely wide enough to move through, but it was better than facing whatever horrors lay on the other side of that door. Reminds me of boot camp, Vex muttered as they crawled. All those character-building exercises. Yeah, Ilaris said. Only this time, if we screw up, it's not just extra push-ups. True, Vex agreed. Though I'd take a face full of mud over teeth any day. They emerged onto the upper deck, the familiar hum of the ship's systems a reassuring backdrop to their pounding hearts. "Think we're safe?" Vex asked, helping Alaris out of the hatch. "For now," she said, glancing around. "But we need to find a way to deal with whatever's down there for good." "Easier said than done," Vex pointed out, "especially with Luminos on the fritz." "Then we'll just have to get creative," Alaris said, determination hardening her voice. They made their way back to the bridge, the ship eerily quiet around them. It was the calm before the storm, and Alaris felt the weight of it pressing down like a physical presence. "Luminos," she said as they entered the bridge. "Status update. I have detected minimal activity from the lower decks," Luminos replied. "However, the threat remains." "Great," Alaris said, rubbing her temples. "Just what we need." Vex slumped into a chair, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "What's the play, Captain?" "We secure the bridge," Alaris said. "And then we figure out how to clean up this mess." "Sounds like a plan," Vex said, though his tone suggested he was dubious at best. Alaris glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You know, for a pessimist, you're surprisingly optimistic." "Hey," Vex said with a shrug. "If we're going out, might as well go out on a high note, right?" "Damn right," Alaris said, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Let's show this galaxy what we're made of." As they settled into their positions, Alaris couldn't help but think of the road ahead. It was going to be long and difficult, but if there was one thing she knew, it was that they were survivors. And survivors always found a way. Vex was muttering to himself, hunched over the terminal like a gambler at the last card table in the universe. "Just decrypt the logs," they said. "It'll be fun," they said, he griped, fingers flitting over keys like an anxious pianist at a dive bar recital. Alaris leaned against the console, arms crossed, watching him with a smirk. "Having fun yet?" "Oh, I'm having the time of my life," Vex replied without looking up. "Just me, you, and a bunch of encrypted logs." "What more could a guy ask for? A stiff drink and a one-way ticket off this death trap," Alaris suggested. "Now you're talking," Vex said, his tone dry as a Martian desert. Suddenly the screen blinked to life, displaying a series of decrypted logs. "Eureka," Vex announced, though he sounded less like a triumphant scientist and more like someone who'd just found gum on their shoe. Alaris leaned in, scanning the text. "Looks like they were running some kind of experiment," she said, brow furrowing as she read. "Something about manipulating human DNA. Because nothing screams good idea like playing God," Vex muttered, scrolling through the files. "Let's see. Genetic splicing, accelerated growth. Oh, and here's a nice little footnote about creating a new species. Just in time for Christmas." Alaris let out a low whistle. "Well, that explains our uninvited guest." "Yup," Vex said, stretching his back with a groan. "Leave it to humans to invent something with more teeth than brains. Problem is," Alaris added, "this thing is more than just a science project gone wrong. It's loose and it's pissed." Vex gave her a sidelong glance. "So, what's the plan, Captain?" "Do we tell it to sit, stay, and roll over?" "I was thinking more along the lines of figuring out how to put it back in its cage," Alaris replied, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "Before it decides we're a tasty snack." "Sounds like a party," Vex said, cracking his knuckles. "But you know as well as I do this isn't just about survival. We've got a moral quandary on our hands." Alaris sighed, the weight of command settling on her shoulders like an old, unwelcome friend. "Yeah, I know. Is it right to destroy something we created, even if that something wants us for lunch? Considering our options are slim to none, I'd say ethics take a back seat," Vex replied with a shrug. "Still, it'd be nice to know what we're up against before it eats us." "Agreed," Alaris said. "Let's see what else these logs have to say." As they combed through the data, the reality of their situation grew clearer and grimmer. The lab reports were painstakingly detailed, chronicling the creation of a hybrid species, a monstrous blend of human ingenuity and hubris. And now, thanks to some catastrophic oversight, that creation was roaming free. "Here's something," Vex said, pointing to a line in the log. "Looks like they were trying to enhance intelligence and adaptability, kind of a best of both worlds scenario." Except the world it's adapting to is the inside of our ship, Alaris replied, grimacing. And I'm pretty sure its idea of intelligence involves seeing us as a buffet. Funny how that works, Vex said with a mirthless chuckle. You play God and suddenly you're the one on the menu. Ilaris rubbed her temples, a headache forming behind her eyes. We need to find a way to communicate with it. Maybe if we can make it understand we're not a threat, we can contain it. Sure, Vex said. And maybe it'll write us a thank you note. Got a better suggestion? Ilaris shot back. I'd suggest a tactical retreat, but we're fresh out of places to run, Vex replied. Guess it's time to put on our diplomacy hats. Right, Ilaris said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Luminos, can you provide any translation assistance? Luminos' voice crackled through the intercom, as calm as ever. I am capable of analyzing language patterns and attempting a rudimentary form of communication. However, I must stress the inherent risks. Risks seem to be the theme of the day, Ilaris said. Let's do it. As Luminos began its analysis, Vex leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. You ever get the feeling that when we signed up for this gig, we missed the part about frequent brushes with death? Every day, Ilaris replied, a wry smile on her lips. But hey, if we make it through this, we can write a book. Yeah, How Not to Die in Space, Vex suggested. Or 101 Ways to Turn Your Ship into a Death Trap, Ilaris countered. The intercom crackled again. Captain, I believe I have established a basic form of communication. I have synthesized an audio file based on the creature's vocal patterns. Play it, Ilaris said, bracing herself for whatever horror awaited. The speakers emitted a series of guttural growls and clicks, alien yet eerily reminiscent of something distinctly human. It was a sound that sent a shiver down her spine, as though the creature was trying to bridge the gap between its primal instincts and its newfound sentience. Well, that's unsettling, Vex said, shuddering. It's like it's trying to talk. And say what? Ilaris asked. Dinner's served, could be, or maybe it's just confused, Vex replied. Wouldn't you be if you woke up like that? Ilaris nodded. So how do we approach this? Try to reason with it, bargain. Maybe we offer it a job as ship mascot, Vex deadpanned. Funny guy, Ilaris said, though her smile quickly faded. Luminos, is there any chance we can use this to establish a two-way communication? I can attempt to emit a modified audio signal, Luminos replied. However, the likelihood of success is uncertain. Uncertainty seems to be the order of the day, Ilaris said, adjusting her posture. Let's give it a shot. A tense silence filled the bridge as Luminos transmitted the signal. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate attempt at diplomacy with a creature born from mankind's ambition and folly. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching thinner than the last. Just as Ilaris was about to lose hope, a response came, an amalgamation of clicks and growls that seemed to form a rudimentary pattern. Is it talking back? Vex asked, leaning forward. It sounds like it, Ilaris replied, straining to decipher meaning from chaos. But without context, we're flying blind. I can attempt to isolate commonalities in the responses, Luminos suggested. This may provide insight into its comprehension. Do it, Ilaris said, watching the terminal as though willing it to yield answers. Minutes dragged by, each one waited with the knowledge that their time was running out. The creature's response was sporadic, as though it was struggling to make sense of the world it had been thrust into. Finally, Luminos spoke again. I have identified a recurring sequence that could be interpreted as a greeting or an inquiry. Inquiry, huh? Vex said, frowning. What do you think it wants to know? What's for dinner? Or something more complex, Ilaris mused. Could be trying to understand us just as we're trying to understand it. Great, Vex said, rubbing his chin. So, what do we say? Hello, welcome to our nightmare. Something like that, Ilaris said with a wry smile. They crafted a basic response, a series of sounds mimicking the creature's patterns, designed to convey peaceful intentions. It was a gamble and they knew it, a whisper in the dark, hoping for an echo. The reply, when it came, was hesitant but unmistakable. It was a step, a bridge built from fragments of comprehension. Well, would you look at that, Vex said, shaking his head in disbelief. It's talking, kind of. Yeah, Ilaris said, feeling a flicker of hope despite herself. Maybe there's a chance to fix this after all. Assuming it doesn't decide we're better off as appetizers, Vex pointed out. One problem at a time, Ilaris said, turning her attention back to the logs. We need to figure out what they were trying to achieve with this experiment. Maybe there's something we can use. They delved deeper into the logs, uncovering a tangled web of ambition and recklessness. It was a story as old as humanity itself, a quest for knowledge that had gone terribly wrong. Looks like they were trying to create a species that could adapt to any environment, Vex said, summarizing the key points. A new frontier in evolution. Yeah, and now it's our problem, Ilaris said, frustration evident in her voice. We can't just destroy it, not without understanding what it is. Guess that means we're in the business of playing teacher, Vex said, not entirely enthused by the prospect. More like zookeepers, Ilaris corrected. Either way, we've got our work cut out for us. As they continued to piece together the fragmented data, Ilaris couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, a crucial detail hidden amidst the chaos. Hey, Vex said, pointing to a section of the log. What's this about a control mechanism? Ilaris leaned closer, reading the text. It's some kind of fail-safe, a way to rein in the creature if it got out of hand. A leash for our little science project, Vex asked. More like a panic button, Ilaris said. But if we can find it, maybe we can contain the creature without having to resort to extreme measures. Finding it might be a tall order, Vex said. We've got a whole ship to search and not much time to do it. Better than nothing, Ilaris replied, feeling a sense of urgency building within her. Let's start with the labs. If there was a control mechanism, it's probably there. They rose from their seats, the weight of their charge pressing down on them. It was a daunting task, but for the first time since the nightmare began, they had a glimmer of hope. Luminos, Ilaris said, keep monitoring the creature. Let us know if there are any changes. Affirmative, Captain, Luminos replied. I shall remain vigilant. As they left the bridge, Vex cast a sidelong glance at Ilaris. So, Captain, how do you feel about teaching a hybrid species the art of negotiation? Ilaris met his gaze, a wry smile on her lips. In a word. Terrified. Glad I'm not the only one, Vex said as they made their way down the corridor. Just remember, Ilaris said, no matter what happens, we've still got each other. Yeah, Vex agreed, though his tone was tinged with skepticism. For better or worse. They reached the lift, its doors creaking open with a sound like a dying animal. Ilaris stepped inside, Vex following close behind. So, Vex said as they descended, think we'll manage to pull this off? Ilaris considered the question, her mind racing with possibilities. I think, she said finally, if we don't, we'll at least go down swinging. Good enough for me, Vex said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. As the lift carried them into the depths of the ship, Ilaris couldn't help but wonder what awaited them. The unknown loomed large, a shadow cast by humanity's ambition and folly. But as long as they were together, she knew they'd face it head-on. They had to. It was the only way forward. The lift doors groaned open, revealing a corridor that looked like it had been home to a trash compactor's greatest hits. Ilaris stepped out, sidestepping a suspicious puddle that could either be oil or something far less mechanical. You ever get the feeling this ship's trying to win the award for most likely to be quarantined? Vex muttered, flicking a piece of unidentifiable gunk off his boot. Charming as always, Vex, Ilaris replied, glancing at her wrist device, which seemed as lost in the ship's maze as she felt. Labs should be just down here. Assuming the ship hasn't decided to play musical rooms again, Vex said, staying close. Seriously, if I ever meet the genius who designed this layout, I'm gonna buy them a drink, and then pour it over their head. Add that to the list of grievances, Ilaris said. Right under homicidal creation loose on deck. They reached the door to the lab, which was thankfully labeled in something close to legible. Ilaris tapped the panel, praying to whatever cosmic gods were listening that it would open without a hitch. The door hissed open, revealing a space that looked like a mad scientist's fever dream. Equipment was strewn about like confetti, and the smell of burned circuits mingled with something far more organic. "Smells like success," Vex quipped, wrinkling his nose. If success was a rotting carcass, Elara stepped inside, eyes scanning for anything that screamed control mechanism. "All right, let's split up and rummage through this treasure trove of horrors. If you find anything with a big red button, don't press it." Vex moved to the right side of the room, navigating around tables covered in dusty equipment. "It's like a history lesson in bad ideas," he said, poking at a beaker that looked like it was growing its own civilization. Ilaris moved to the left, her gaze lingering on a bank of dusty terminals. "Think any of these relics might hold the answer to our little crisis?" "Only if they are programmed with the Fix Everything protocol," Vex replied, his voice muffled as he leaned under a table. "Or maybe a How to Negotiate with Angry Science Experiments app." Ilaris couldn't help but chuckle as she activated one of the terminals, its screen flickering to life with a series of garbled text. "Well, if nothing else, at least we're consistent in our failures." "Hey, consistency is key," Vex said, standing up with a small device in hand. "Found this little guy." "Might be the panic button, or it might just be a fancy paperweight." Ilaris took the device, examining it closely. "Looks like a remote interface. Could be what we're after. Or it could be the self-destruct," Vex said, with the kind of optimism that suggested he'd welcome the end as a relief. "Let's hope not," Ilaris replied, her fingers dancing over the interface. "Luminos, can you analyze this device?" The ship's voice crackled through the intercom, as cool as a cucumber fresh out of cryo. "Analyzing, Captain. Preliminary data suggests it is indeed a control interface designed for genetic manipulation projects." "Sounds like our lucky day," Vex said, leaning against the wall. "Now we just have to figure out how to make it work without accidentally vaporizing ourselves." "Details, details," Ilaris replied, focusing on the device. Before they could delve further, the lights flickered ominously. Ilaris felt a sense of dread coil in her stomach, a familiar harbinger of things going from bad to worse. "Luminos, what's happening?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the gathering gloom. "There's been an unauthorized attempt to access the ship's mainframe," Luminos replied, with the kind of calm that suggested the AI was enjoying this far too much. "It appears our visitor is more technologically adept than anticipated." "Perfect," Vex muttered. "Now we have a hacker on top of everything else." Ilaris cursed under her breath. "We need to regain control or this ship's gonna be a floating coffin." "Which part are you more worried about?" Vex asked. "The floating or the coffin?" "Both," Ilaris snapped, tapping furiously at the terminal. "Luminos, can you block the intrusion?" "I am attempting to do so, Captain," Luminos replied, sounding almost philosophical about their impending doom. "However, the entity's approach is highly advanced." "Great," Vex said, his sarcasm palpable. "The one time we don't want something to be advanced." Ilaris focused on the device, her mind racing. "If we can find a way to communicate directly with the creature, we might be able to convince it that we're not the enemy." "Big if," Vex said, peering over her shoulder. "Unless it's got an off button, we might be out of luck." Ilaris continued working, sweat beading on her brow. "We can't just sit here. If this thing is intelligent, maybe we can reason with it." "Like a parent reasoning with a toddler holding a knife," Vex observed. "Guess that means this is daycare from hell." Luminos' voice broke through their tense discussion. "I have managed to isolate a portion of the intrusion. It appears the entity is attempting to access environmental controls." "Environmental controls," Ilaris repeated, gears in her head clicking into place. "It's trying to adapt its surroundings. Maybe it's not just trying to survive, maybe it's trying to thrive." "Yeah, but on whose terms?" Vex replied, looking increasingly uneasy. "We let it play house and we might end up as unwilling guests." Ilaris bit her lip, the weight of their predicament heavy on her shoulders. "We need to talk to it. If it understands survival, maybe it can understand cooperation." Vex's expression was skeptical, but he nodded. "Worth a shot." If nothing else, we buy ourselves some time before it decides we're surplus to requirements. Ilaris set the device on the table and turned back to the terminal. Luminos, can you patch us through to the creature using this interface? I shall attempt to open a communications channel, Luminos responded. However, this will expose our systems to further risk. Risk is our middle name, Vex quipped. Right next to bad idea and hope this works. Ilaris smirked despite the situation. Do it, Luminos, let's roll the dice. A moment later, the lab filled with a cacophony of alien sounds, the creature's voice filtered through the ship systems. It was a chorus of growls and clicks, a language without words, yet heavy with intent. Ilaris leaned closer to the terminal, trying to project calm authority. We mean you no harm. Let's work together, survive together. The response was immediate, a series of faster clicks as though the creature were considering the offer. Think it's buying it? Vex asked, crossing his arms. Ilaris held up a hand, straining to hear the nuances in the response. Possibly. If it understands survival, it might realize we're on the same side. The creature's answer came, a slower, almost contemplative series of clicks. It was far from a promise, but it was a step away from outright hostility. Well, it's not trying to kill us. Yet, Vex remarked. That's the spirit, Vex, Ilaris said. Besides, I've always found that minimal attempts on my life make for better company. Luminos's voice came again, a note of cautious relief in its tone. The entity appears to be hesitating in its attempts to access our systems. It seems to be, considering your proposal. Ilaris allowed herself a moment of tentative hope. Good. Let's keep it that way. Of course, now we have another problem, Vex pointed out, gesturing to the lab around them. If this thing can fiddle with our systems, what's stopping it from turning the whole ship against us? Ilaris sighed, tapping her fingers against the table. Not much. But if we can convince it we're more useful alive than dead, maybe that's enough to keep it playing nice. Vex snorted. Alive's a pretty low bar, but I guess when you're dangling over a pit, you take whatever hand holds there are. Ilaris couldn't argue with that logic. Okay, Luminos, keep monitoring the creature's activities. Let us know as soon as there are any changes. Acknowledged, Captain, Luminos replied. With the immediate crisis on pause, Ilaris surveyed the lab again. We need more information. There's got to be more to this control mechanism, some way to cement our control or, at the very least, gain its trust. Vex moved to another terminal, activating its screen. I'll dig through what's left of the logs, see if there's anything about how they plan to keep their pet project on a leash. Ilaris nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead. They were playing with fire, handling something beyond their comprehension. But with no way out, they had no choice but to forge ahead. You ever think about what life would be like if we'd taken desk jobs? Vex asked, breaking the silence. Ilaris chuckled, despite herself. Probably just as deadly, but with fewer interesting stories. The tension eased, if only a little. They worked side by side, the hum of the ship around them a constant reminder of the peril they faced. But as long as they held the line together, they had a fighting chance. The lights flickered again, but to Ilaris they seemed a little brighter now. They had a path forward, a possibility of resolution, and in the darkest corners of space, that was more than most could hope for. All right, Vex, Ilaris said, her voice steady with determination. Let's see if we can turn this disaster into something we can work with. Wouldn't be the first time, Vex replied, a smirk playing on his lips. And probably not the last. Ilaris smiled too, feeling the gravity of their situation lighten, if just a fraction. In this universe of uncertainty, one truth remained. They were in this together, for better or worse. Ilaris glanced around the lab, eyes flitting over the mess of carelessly strewn equipment. If the ship was a floating coffin, this lab was the coffin's cluttered attic, a place where forgotten relics collected dust, and everyone silently hoped no one would notice the rats. Vex, any luck with those logs, or should I start polishing my eulogy? She asked, her voice laced with weary sarcasm. Vex smirked, not looking up from the terminal. Oh, definitely keep that eulogy handy. Might need it when this homicidal home invader decides we're the hors d'oeuvres. Ilaris chuckled dryly. Make sure to mention my fondness for catastrophic adventures and expensive drinks. Noted, Vex replied, tapping away. I'm sure there's a heartfelt ballad in here somewhere. The lights overhead flickered again, reminding them of the knife edge they were dancing on. Ilaris shook her head, trying to dispel the knot of tension that had settled in her shoulders. The ship felt haunted by its past, its present, and its very likely bleak future. Luminos, she called out, hoping the AI wasn't as dead as a doornail. Status report. How bad is it, Captain? The situation is best described as dire. Luminos responded with the kind of calm that suggested the AI might have picked up an unhealthy nihilism from its human counterparts. Power reserves are depleting rapidly. Environmental controls are in flux, and the entity continues to probe for weaknesses. Great, Ilaris muttered. Why not throw in a plague of locusts while we're at it, working on it? Vex quipped, eyes still glued to the terminal. Just need a few more catastrophic variables. Ilaris turned her attention back to the lab, her brain spinning like a malfunctioning gyro. They were trapped in a spacefaring tin can with a murder-happy science project, and their options were slimmer than a diet wafer. What a day to be alive. Vex, let's assume we survive this, Ilaris said, pacing as she spoke. What's the first thing you're doing? Easy, Vex said, grinning. A long vacation on a planet where the most dangerous thing is a disgruntled coconut. Ilaris snorted. Sounds peaceful. I'd settle for a day without existential threats. Dream big, Vex replied, his voice tinged with mock hope. Yeah, I'll put that on my to-do list right after don't get eaten by alien monstrosity, Ilaris said, her attempt at humor only half-hearted. The holographic intercom crackled to life, Luminos's voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. Captain, the entity has ceased its attempts to breach the environmental controls. It appears to be waiting for what? Vex asked, eyebrows knitting together. An invitation to Sunday brunch. Ilaris rubbed her temples, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. Maybe it's realized we're not going down without a fight, or it's just building up to something bigger. Like a cat playing with its food, Vex added, his tone as dry as a desert. Great. We're the interstellar mice. Ilaris sighed, leaning against the wall. We need a plan, or at least an illusion of one. Luminos, is there any way we can regain an advantage? There may be a way to reroute power from non-essential systems to boost our defensive capabilities. Luminos suggested, its voice as placid as ever. However, this will leave us with limited reserves for other functions, like breathing, Vex muttered. Exactly, Luminos confirmed, as if it were amused by the concept of oxygen. Ilaris considered the options, each one more dismal than the last. We can't fight it head-on. We need to think sideways. Out crazy the crazy, Vex eyed her curiously. And how exactly do we do that, oh fearless leader? By being unpredictable, Ilaris decided, a determined glint in her eye. If it's adapting to us, we need to be something it can't adapt to. Wonderful, Vex said dryly. We're going to play the wild card. In a game that's most likely rigged, got a better idea? Ilaris challenged, folding her arms. Nope. But if we pull this off, I'm definitely adding catastrophic genius to my resume, Vex said, his grin full of mischief. Ilaris exhaled, trying to push away the dread that gnawed at her. They were on the brink of disaster, balanced precariously between survival and something much worse. But they still had each other, and as long as they were in this together, they had a fighting chance. All right, Luminos, reroute that power, Ilaris ordered, her voice firm. Let's prepare to give our guest a welcome it won't forget. Understood, Captain, Luminos replied. The ship hummed, the lights flickering as power was redirected. Ilaris could feel the ship's trembling resolve echoing her own, a fragile hope in the midst of overwhelming odds. Vex, keep digging through those logs, Ilaris said. We need every scrap of intel we can get. On it, Vex replied, focusing on the terminal with renewed vigor. Ilaris moved to another terminal, trying to make sense of the chaos on the screen. Every line of code felt like a riddle, an alien language she was desperate to decipher. Outside, the corridor echoed with the distant groans of the ship's hull, a reminder of how close they were to oblivion. "Hey, Ilaris," Vex called, breaking the silence. "Check this out." Ilaris joined him, peering at the screen. "What have you found?" "Some old data logs about the cloning experiment," Vex said. "Looks like they were trying to create a perfect soldier. Fast, strong, adaptable." Ilaris felt a chill run down her spine, "and now it's loose in the ship." "Perfect, perfectly terrifying," Vex corrected, "but there's more. They had a failsafe, a neural override command." "That sounds promising," Ilaris said, hope flickering to life. "Where is it?" "Good news, it's in the system," Vex said. "Bad news, it's encrypted tighter than a miser's purse. Can you break it?" Ilaris asked, her voice tense with urgency. Vex shrugged. "I can try, but it might take a while." "We don't have a while," Ilaris said. "We need to pull out all the stops." "Guess it's time to see how lucky we really are," Vex said, cracking his knuckles. Ilaris nodded, her resolve hardening. "Luminos, keep monitoring the entity's movements. Let us know if it changes tactics." "Affirmative, Captain," Luminos replied. The lab fell silent, the only sound the quiet tapping of keys as Vex worked his magic. Ilaris kept her eyes on the terminal, willing the ship to hold together a little longer. "Ever think we'd end up like this?" Vex asked, his tone light despite the tension. "Trapped in a haunted ship with a killer clone," Ilaris replied. "Not exactly on my bucket list. Yet here we are," Vex said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And I wouldn't trade it," "Me neither," Ilaris admitted. "As far as near-death experiences go, this one's got style. Let's hope it ends with us in one piece," Vex replied, his focus unwavering. Ilaris leaned back, the weight of their predicament settling over her again. But despite the odds, she felt a flicker of hope. They were resourceful, determined, and more than a little reckless. If anyone could pull off a miracle, it was them. "All right, Vex," Ilaris said, her voice steady. "Let's see if we can turn this ship around." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Vex replied, a grin in his voice. The Iors passed in a blur, the ship systems flickering in and out like an indecisive ghost. Ilaris felt the strain of fatigue creeping in, but she forced herself to stay sharp. They were close, too close to give up now. Finally, Vex let out a triumphant whoop, breaking the tension like a burst dam. "Got it. The override command is Iors." Ilaris felt a surge of relief. "Luminos, initiate the override. Let's see if we can talk some sense into our guest." "Activating now, Captain," Luminos replied. The ship seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with anticipation. Ilaris closed her eyes, praying that this gamble would pay off. After what felt like an eternity, the intercom crackled to life, the alien clicks and growls coming through once more. But this time there was a new note in the creature's voice, a hesitance that hinted at comprehension. Ilaris leaned forward, her voice calm and firm. "We're offering you a choice. Cooperation over conflict. Together we can ensure survival." The creature's response was slow, but there was a discernible shift in its tone, a tentative acceptance, a step away from aggression. "Think it's working?" Vex asked, his voice full of cautious hope. "I think it's listening," Ilaris replied, her heart pounding with adrenaline. "Good enough for me," Vex said, a grin spreading across his face. Ilaris exhaled, the tension in the room easing slightly. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time she dared to believe they might have a shot. "All right, Vex," Ilaris said, her voice full of determination. "Let's keep this momentum going. We're not done yet." "Not by a long shot," Vex agreed, a spark of optimism in his tone. Together they turned back to the terminals, ready to face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger, but as long as they stood together they had a fighting chance. In the darkness of space, amidst the swirling chaos, Ilaris and Vex found their resolve, a beacon of hope in a universe that often seemed devoid of it. And as the Luminos continued its journey, they knew one thing for certain: they were not alone. The lights flickered once more, but this time they stayed on. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Vex leaned back from the terminal, staring at the screen with wide-eyed disbelief. "Wholly malfunctioning circuits, Ilaris. I think I've cracked it." Ilaris raised an eyebrow, barely managing to suppress her skepticism. If you found the secret to surviving in this floating death trap, I'll personally nominate you for the universe's least likely savior award. Thanks, Cap. Always knew you had faith in me, Vex replied, sarcasm dripping from his voice like oil from a leaky engine. Alaris crossed her arms, leaning against the grimy wall. So what's this miraculous breakthrough of yours, the creature? Our homicidal science fair project has a symbiotic relationship with the ship, Vex explained, his tone a mix of excitement and disbelief. It's not just some rogue biology experiment gone wrong. It's connected. Like emotionally. Do we need to throw it a sympathy party? Alaris quipped, though her interest was piqued. Not quite. More like it's jacked into the Luminos' system somehow. Like a parasite, but one that doesn't want to kill its host. At least not immediately. That's some comfort, Alaris said dryly. So what? It's part of the ship now, more like the ship is part of it. The logs suggest it was designed to integrate with starships, enhancing them. And it's not just some mindless brute. It's got instincts to protect its turf. Alaris rubbed her chin, pondering the implications. So, it might actually listen if we can convince it we're on the same side. Damn, Vex. You might have just given us a way out of this mess. Never thought I'd say this, but I'm considering placing a bet on optimism, Vex replied with a crooked grin. Don't get ahead of yourself, Alaris warned. We still need to figure out how to communicate with it, and convince it not to turn us into space paste. Well, good thing I've been brushing up on xenobiology in my spare time, Vex joked. I'm practically a diplomat now. Alaris rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of hope in her expression. All right, let's assume you're right, because why the hell not? How do we talk to the thing? Vex turned back to his terminal, fingers flying over the keys. The logs mention a way to interface directly with the symbiotic system. With Luminos' help, we might be able to patch through a communication channel. Lovely. We'll just dial it up like we're ordering space pizza, Alaris said, pushing off the wall. Luminos, you tracking this? Affirmative, Captain, the AI replied, its voice as steady as ever. I am prepared to facilitate the connection. However, I must caution that there is inherent risk. Story of our lives, Alaris remarked. Let's do it. What's life without a little danger? Less life, Vex said, clearly enjoying his own wit. Alaris ignored him. Luminos, initiate the connection when ready. Let's see if we can't charm our way out of this. The ship hummed with a new energy, lights flickering as systems adjusted to accommodate the unorthodox request. Alaris felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. This was it, their shot at survival, or at least a delay in their demise. Connection established, Luminos announced, a subtle tension underlying its words. All right, here goes nothing, Alaris muttered, stepping towards the terminal. Let's make friends with the enemy. On-screen, the interface pulsed with a strange, organic pattern, reminiscent of a heartbeat. Alaris took a deep breath, steadying herself. This is Captain Alaris of the Luminos. We understand you have a connection to the ship. We're offering to work together. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Alaris wondered if they'd just yelled into the void. But then, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the ship. It wasn't hostile, though, more like a questioning growl. I think it's listening, Vex said, his voice tinged with awe. Symbiotic entity, we share a common goal, survival. This ship, and by extension you, are in danger. We can help each other, Alaris continued, her tone firm yet diplomatic. The growl shifted to a series of clicks and hums, an alien symphony that sent vibrations through the floor. It was a language of sorts, if one had the patience of a saint and the ears of an octopus. I think it's trying to respond, Vex noted. Luminos, can you make sense of this? Translating, Luminos replied calmly. The entity expresses curiosity and caution. It perceives us as both threat and ally. Well, at least it's not aiming for our throats immediately, Vex said. Let it know we mean no harm, Alaris instructed, and that we're all stuck in this cosmic joke together. Luminos emitted a series of tones and pulses, a digital interpretation of the entity's language. Alaris watched, heart pounding, as the screen flickered with new data. "The entity acknowledges your offer," Luminos reported. "It seems willing to cooperate, provided we do not infringe upon its autonomy. Guess it doesn't want a roommate," Vex quipped. "Right. Now we negotiate living arrangements with an alien monster," Ilaris sighed. "Think of it like interstellar roommate therapy." The ship's lights steadied, the atmosphere less oppressive now. It was progress, albeit of the don't get your hopes up variety. "What's next, Captain?" Vex asked, leaning back with a satisfied grin. "We keep this truce going long enough to fix the damn ship and figure a way out of this sector before our mystery pursuer catches up with us," Ilaris replied. "But first, we need to ensure this thing doesn't go berserk and try to redecorate with our entrails." "Lovely imagery, as always," Vex said, shaking his head. "Let me see if I can coax some more info about its intentions from these logs." Ilaris nodded, feeling a cautious optimism she hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. "Luminos, keep monitoring the entity's responses. Let us know if it starts throwing a tantrum." "Affirmative, Captain," Luminos confirmed. As Vex dove back into the labyrinthine data, Ilaris took a moment to lean against the terminal, her mind racing through possibilities. They had a chance now, slim though it was, to turn the tide. All they needed was a little more time, a lot more luck, and maybe a miracle or two. "Hey, Ilaris," Vex called after a beat, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Yeah," she replied, still lost in thought. "You ever think maybe this whole disaster is just the universe's way of telling us we're meant for something bigger?" Ilaris snorted, shaking her head. "If by bigger you mean bigger coffin, then sure. But hey, at least we're not dead yet. Always a silver lining," Vex chuckled. "Let's keep it that way," Ilaris said, determination lacing her words. "I'm not ready to be a footnote in someone else's cautionary tale." "Agreed. Let's make this story a bestseller," Vex replied, turning back to his terminal with renewed focus. The minutes ticked by, punctuated only by the soft hum of the ship and the occasional beep of the terminal. Ilaris felt the tension in her shoulders gradually ease, though she knew better than to relax completely. They were still walking a razor's edge, and one misstep would send them plummeting. "All right," Vex said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I think I've got something. What's up?" Ilaris asked, moving to peer over his shoulder. "The entity, it's not just protecting itself. It's trying to get somewhere. The logs mention coordinates, but they're fragmented. Coordinates for what?" Ilaris asked, frowning. "Don't know. Could be a safe zone, could be a trap. But whatever it is, that's where it's headed." Ilaris considered this new wrinkle, weighing their options. "If we can help it get there, maybe it'll be more inclined to keep us alive. Or it could decide we're no longer useful and toss us out the airlock," Vex pointed out. "True. But let's cling to the illusion of control, shall we?" Ilaris replied, feigning cheerfulness. "Sounds like a plan," Vex said with a chuckle. "So, do we follow the breadcrumbs? Let's see where they lead," Ilaris decided. "Luminos, can you plot a course based on these coordinates?" "Affirmative, Captain," Luminos responded. "I will require several minutes to compile the fragmented data." "We've got nothing but time," Ilaris said, though she knew it was a lie. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Turning back to Vex, she added, "Keep an eye on those systems. If this thing decides to yank the control cord, I want to know before we're cartwheeling through a black hole." "On it, Captain," Vex replied, his focus unwavering. Ilaris took a deep breath, trying to banish the gnawing anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her. Their situation was still precarious, but they had a path forward now, a tenuous lifeline in the vast, uncaring expanse. "Here's hoping this doesn't end in cosmic roadkill," she muttered to herself, crossing her fingers for luck. As the Luminos adjusted its course, Ilaris felt the ship shift beneath her feet, a subtle reminder that despite everything they were still moving, still fighting, and maybe, just maybe, still winning. "Well, whatever happens, at least we'll have one hell of a story to tell," Vex said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Ilaris chuckled, feeling a spark of camaraderie. "Damn right. Let's make sure it's a story worth finishing." The ship creaked like an old man's knees as the Luminos adjusted its course. Captain Alaris could almost feel the Luminos rolling its metaphorical eyes, even as it complied. The thought made her smirk. An AI with a personality, who'd have guessed? Would you look at that, we're cruising into the void with a stowaway that thinks it's king of the heap, Alaris said, leaning back against the terminal. The lights above flickered, perhaps in agreement. Not how I pictured my week going. Vex was hunched over his terminal, brow furrowed, the picture of a man who missed his calling as a lab rat. Week. I can't remember the last time we had a normal day. And I use normal very loosely. Right. Normal like space without vacuum, Alaris replied. She felt the hum of the ship under her boots, a constant reminder that they weren't drifting dead yet. Small victories. Got any brilliant plans, Captain? Or are we still playing interstellar dodgeball with fate? Vex asked, fingers dancing over the keys like he was composing a symphony of bad decisions. Alaris chuckled. Nah, just figuring out how to negotiate with our new symbiotic buddy. You know, without it deciding, we're better off as meat decorations. Nothing says diplomacy like avoiding becoming part of the Daker, Vex said, eyes glinting with dark humor. So, what do we know about this thing, beyond it being a clingy house guest? Only that it's got a mind of its own and an ego to match, Alaris replied. But hey, it's not every day you meet a creature that's part GPS, part guard dog. And part I might eat you in your sleep, Vex added. Charming. Alaris let out a dry laugh. Yeah, well, at least it wants something. Means it can be reasoned with. Maybe even convinced not to murder us in our beds. Optimism. Never thought I'd see the day, Vex said, raising an eyebrow. Think it'll listen to reason. Depends on if our reasoning involves not ending up in its digestive tract, Alaris said. Luminos, how's our guest doing? The entity appears stable and responsive, Captain, Luminos replied, its voice a calm counterpoint to the chaos around them. It is processing the information we have shared. Great. Meanwhile, we're sweating bullets, Vex grumbled. Hey, sweating means we're still here, Alaris shot back. I'll take sweaty over dead any day, Vex snorted. Fair point, so how do we sweet-talk it into not killing us all? Alaris shrugged. Make it a partner, promise it a safe journey, convince it we're not the enemy. Partners with a space parasite. Hell, my mom would be proud, Vex said with a mock salute. Your mom would probably suggest getting a new job, Alaris replied, shaking her head. All right, let's see if we can't make this work. Luminos, translate this. We recognize your autonomy and wish to collaborate. Transmitting message, Luminos confirmed. The screen pulsed with an organic rhythm, the alien language a complex dance of clicks and hums. Alaris held her breath, waiting for a response. Maybe this time the universe would throw them a bone instead of a punch. After a tense moment, Luminos spoke up. The entity acknowledges your proposal. It is willing to establish a cooperative relationship on the condition of mutual respect and assistance. Well, that sounds almost civil, Vex remarked, eyebrows raised. Maybe it's got more manners than some humans I know. Could say the same about you, Alaris retorted, but the corners of her mouth twitched upwards. All right, we're getting somewhere. What's next? Vex tapped a few keys, bringing up another set of fragmented logs. Looks like it wants to reach those coordinates I mentioned. It's a destination of significance to the species. Destination, huh? What are the odds it's a tourist trap? Alaris said, crossing her arms. Vex shrugged. Could be a sanctuary or a rendezvous point. Either way, it's important to it. So we help it get there, Alaris said, nodding slowly. And maybe, just maybe, we come out of this alive. And not as a cautionary tale, Vex added. A very bloody, very messy cautionary tale, Alaris corrected. Luminos, keep plotting that course. We've got ourselves a hitchhiker. Understood, Captain, Luminos replied. Course adjustments will be completed shortly. Alaris let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. It felt good to have a plan, even if it was held together by the thinnest of threads and the most foolhardy of hopes. Hey, Alaris, Vex said, breaking into her thoughts. Yeah, you ever think about what you'll do if we actually survive this mess? Alaris chuckled, a rich, genuine sound that echoed surprisingly well in the cramped space. I might just take up knitting. Heard space jumpers are all the rage. Can't picture you with needles, Vex said with a grin. More of a shoot-a-tansy type, aren't you? Damn right, Alaris confirmed. But hey, maybe I'll learn to knit with a gun. Doubt the universe would see that coming. Vex laughed, the sound a rare lightness in the dense atmosphere. I'd pay to see that. Let's make it back first, Alaris said, returning the grin. Then we'll see about starting a new fashion trend. Deal, Vex replied, settling back into his chair. Now, let's make sure our new friend doesn't decide to redecorate with us. Alaris nodded, feeling the weight of their shared purpose. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. They had a mission, a goal, and a chance, a sliver of hope in the darkness. All right, Luminos, how's our symbiote doing? Alaris asked, focusing back on the task at hand. It is adapting well to our systems, Captain, Luminos said. There is a stable connection between the entity and the ship's resources. Good. Last thing we need is for it to start yanking wires like a toddler with no bedtime, Alaris muttered, rubbing her temples. Vex glanced at her. Think we'll actually pull this off? Honestly, I've learned never to underestimate the combination of desperation and blind luck, Alaris replied. So yeah, maybe. Desperation and luck. I like those odds, Vex said with a wry smile. As the two settled back into their routine, well, as routine as it got when babysitting an alien hitchhiker, Alaris felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. It was the calm that came from accepting chaos, embracing the absurdity of their existence. All right, Alaris said after a moment. Let's keep this ship and ourselves in one piece. No stress, no pressure. Piece of cake, Vex replied. If the cake was baked with high explosives, sure. Stop giving me ideas, Alaris joked, but her tone was light. They were in deep, but at least they were in it together. Time passed, marked only by the steady hum of the ship and the occasional beep of a terminal. Alaris and Vex worked in tandem, keeping one eye on the entity's status and the other on their own systems. It was a delicate balance, a dance on the edge of a knife. Got something, Vex said suddenly, breaking the silence. What is it? Alaris asked, peering over his shoulder again. The entity wants to share something. A memory, maybe, Vex said, squinting at the screen. A memory, Alaris echoed, intrigued. Like a "this is your life" montage, something like that. It's trying to communicate, its own struggle, its identity, Vex explained, tapping a few keys to bring up a display. The holographic screen shimmered to life, displaying a series of images and sensations. They were fragmented like shards of a broken mirror, but together they painted a picture, a story of creation, of survival, of loneliness. It's showing us what it's been through, Alaris murmured, captivated by the display. What do you make of it? Vex watched, his brow furrowed in concentration. Looks like it's been fighting for survival from the start. Created, experimented on, abandoned. No wonder it's got trust issues. Sounds like every bad relationship ever, Alaris said, her voice tinged with empathy. No wonder it's a bit bitey. Yeah, Vex said softly, his usual sarcasm replaced by something gentler. It's been alone, fighting against everything. Maybe it just wants a place to belong. Alaris watched the display, her mind racing with possibilities. This creature, this symbiote, it was more than just a threat. It was a being with its own desires, its own fears. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other. All right, Alaris said, breaking the contemplative silence. Let's reach out. Luminos, tell it we understand. We've all been lost at some point. Message transmitted, Luminos confirmed. The ship seemed to hold its breath as they waited for a response. Alaris felt a brief flicker of doubt. Were they really doing the right thing? But then the entity responded, its clicks and hums resonating with a newfound warmth. It's accepting our offer, Luminos translated. The entity agrees to a partnership, recognizing our shared journey. How about that, Vex said, a smile breaking through his usual cynicism. Maybe this won't end with us as space debris. Maybe not, Alaris echoed, feeling a spark of hope. We might just make it out of this after all. The ship's lights brightened, as if in agreement, casting the lab in a soft, hopeful glow. Ilaris allowed herself a moment to savor the victory, a small step but a significant one. "Looks like we're in this together," Vex said, his tone light. "A ragtag crew and their pet symbiote." "Pet, let's not push it," Ilaris replied with a chuckle. "More like a very demanding roommate, with better communication skills than most humans," Vex added. "True," Ilaris conceded. "All right, let's get back to work. We've got a ship to fix and a journey to complete." As they settled back into their tasks, Ilaris felt the weight of their newfound alliance. They had taken a step into the unknown, embraced a future that was as uncertain as it was promising. "Hey, Ilaris," Vex said after a while, his voice thoughtful. "Yeah, you ever wonder if maybe this is our bigger purpose? Not just surviving, but finding a way to live, really live." Ilaris considered his words, feeling the truth resonate within her. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just about making the most of what we've got." "Either way, I'm glad it's us," Vex replied, and there was an honest warmth in his voice. "Me too," Ilaris said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Now let's make sure we live to tell the tale." Together they turned back to their work, side by side in the depths of space. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were steering their own course. And that, Ilaris thought, was worth fighting for. The Luminos hurtled through space, a silver bullet in the vast nothingness. Captain Ilaris stood on the bridge, gazing at the whirl of stars through the viewport. The ship's interior was as chaotic as ever, wires dangling like runaway noodles, panels flickering like indecisive strobe lights. But now it carried an air of reluctant camaraderie, like a dysfunctional family forced to share a cramped apartment. The symbiote, integrated into the ship's systems, was behaving itself. Mostly. Every now and then it would tweak a control panel, making it light up like a Christmas tree, just to remind them it was still there, lurking, watching, probably judging. Ilaris could respect that. "Captain, the entity reports it is satisfied with our current trajectory," Luminos chimed in, its voice as unflappable as ever. "Satisfied, huh?" Ilaris said, leaning back in her chair. "Well, as long as it's not planning to redecorate with our innards, I'm good." Vex swiveled around in his chair, stretching his arms. "I'm just hoping its idea of satisfaction doesn't involve swallowing us whole." "You're such an optimist," Ilaris replied, smirking. "Let's just keep it happy. We've all been in bad mood swings before, right?" Vex chuckled. "Yeah, but my mood swings don't usually involve disemboweling people." The terminal in front of Vex beeped, an incessant reminder of the ship's endless demands. He sighed, tapping away. "You know, I always thought we'd end up as a footnote in some galactic archive, humans, dumb enough to befriend a space parasite." Ilaris shrugged. "Could be worse. We could have been a cautionary tale in a safety manual." "Here's hoping it doesn't come to that," Vex said, eyeing the data streams with suspicion. "So, what's the plan now, Cap? Keep babysitting our symbiote buddy until we reach its mystery destination?" Ilaris pursed her lips, considering. "Seems like it. And maybe, along the way, we'll learn something about how not to screw with nature. Or maybe how to screw with it the right way," Vex countered. "I mean, who thought splicing DNA would be like mixing drinks? One wrong pour and you've got a ticking time bomb." "Yeah, and now we've got a potential space buddy with trust issues," Ilaris said. "But hey, we're all learning, right? Learning not to touch big red buttons, for starters," Vex added, rolling his eyes. "You know, I'm starting to think that every groundbreaking discovery begins with someone saying, 'Oops,'" Ilaris mused, her tone light despite the gravity of their situation. "Or watch this," Vex replied, shaking his head. Either way, here we are. As the ship cruised through the void, Ilaris couldn't help but reflect on the unintended consequences of their actions. They'd stumbled upon something new, something that could redefine their understanding of life in the universe. But it had also shown them the dark side of playing God, the dangers of tampering with things best left alone. It was a sobering thought, one that lingered even as they joked and bantered. They were explorers, yes, but they were also creators, responsible for what they brought into the world. And sometimes what they created turned out to be more than just a simple experiment. It was a living, breathing testament to their hubris and curiosity. "Hey, Ilaris," Vex called out, breaking her reverie. "Yeah, think we'll get an award for this. Maybe a medal for most likely to be quarantined." Ilaris laughed, the sound echoing through the bridge. "If there's one thing I know, it's that we're definitely a contender." "I'll start practicing my acceptance speech," Vex said, grinning. "Might need to brush up on my thank you for not killing us lines." "Just remember to thank the little people," Ilaris replied, smirking. "Like the guy who decided genetic splicing was a good idea." "Right. Unsung heroes and all that," Vex nodded, his tone dripping with sarcasm. As the ship drifted on, Ilaris found herself pondering the philosophical implications of their discovery. Humanity had always been fascinated by the unknown, drawn to it like moths to a flame. Sometimes it led them to incredible breakthroughs, leaps in understanding that propelled them forward. But it also came with risks, dangers that could threaten everything they held dear. The entity they'd inadvertently created was a reminder of that duality. It was both a marvel and a menace, a testament to their ingenuity and their folly. And yet in their shared journey it had become something more, a symbol of hope, of the possibility of coexistence and understanding. "Hey, Vex," Ilaris said, her voice thoughtful. "Yeah, you think maybe we're meant to learn something from all this? About who we are, where we stand in the universe?" Vex leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "Could be. Or maybe it's just about finding our place. Understanding that we're part of a bigger picture. One that doesn't always play by our rules," Ilaris added, nodding. "Sometimes we have to adapt, or get eaten," Vex quipped, a wry smile on his lips. Ilaris chuckled, shaking her head. "Yeah, there's always that." They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. The ship hummed softly around them, a constant reminder of their journey. It was a journey that had taken them to the brink of destruction and back, a journey that had taught them the value of resilience, of adaptability, of the ties that bound them together. "Luminos," Ilaris called out, breaking the quiet. "How's our new friend doing?" "The entity appears content, Captain," Luminos replied, its voice calm. "It is maintaining stable integration with our systems." "Good to know," Ilaris said, nodding. "Maybe it'll even start paying rent." "Don't push it," Vex warned, laughing. "Last thing we need is it figuring out it's the one paying our bills." "True," Ilaris admitted. "For now, let's just focus on getting to its destination." As they worked together, a strange sense of peace settled over Ilaris. The chaos and unpredictability of their situation hadn't changed, but now it felt manageable, like a storm that was finally showing signs of clearing. They had a purpose, a goal, a reason to keep moving forward. "Hey, Ilaris," Vex said, breaking the silence once more. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to understand why we do this, why we put ourselves out here, risking everything." Ilaris raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And why's that?" "Because maybe, just maybe, we're meant to find something bigger than ourselves, something that makes all the craziness worth it." Ilaris smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "You might be right, Vex. Maybe that's what this journey is all about." "Yeah," Vex agreed, nodding. "And hey, if we survive, we'll have one hell of a story to tell." "Let's make sure we do," Ilaris said, her voice firm. "Now, let's get back to work. We've got a ship to keep running and a hitchhiker to drop off." With renewed determination, they turned their attention back to the task at hand. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and unknowns, but they faced it together, ready to embrace whatever came their way. And as the Luminos continued its journey through the stars, they knew that whatever happened next, they would face it as a team, a crew bound by shared experiences, laughter, and a common goal. Together they would navigate the uncharted reaches of space, their newfound ally at their side, hopeful for what lay ahead. "To the next adventure," Ilaris said softly, raising an imaginary toast. "To not getting ourselves killed," Vex added with a grin. And with that they settled into the rhythm of their journey, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. Because in the end, that was what being human was all about, pushing boundaries, seeking answers and finding hope in the darkest corners of the cosmos.